I recently upgraded my lighting kit with the Amaran 360c. Now on paper, it feels like a game changer. More outputs, full RGB, and most importantly, no external ballast, just a simple power cable. But here's the real question. Is the Amaran 360c actually a meaningful upgrade? Or is it just more specs without real-world advantage? How does it compare to the Amaran 200X, the light that I've been taking on the road with me for years? Is it actually worth the investment, or did I just waste a bunch of money? Well, today I'll show you what I found after putting both lights to the test side by side. Let's dive right in. When Amaran announced the 360c and the 660c, it was the first time that I'd seen this level of output without an external ballast. And just to be clear, I am not compensated or sponsored by anybody. I currently travel with the Amaran 200X, so the idea of adding more power while keeping things compact and travel-friendly immediately appealed to me. So I decided to try the 360c, hoping it would deliver a meaningful increase in punch over the 200X without changing the way I travel. Before calling this an upgrade, I wanted to put it through some tests and see if it actually justified the switch, especially when it comes to handling daylight windows. Before we dive into the test and the data, let's look at the main feature of the 360. It has no outside ballast. The power supply is integrated within the lamp, so all it needs is a simple power cord into a straight outlet. The color temperature range from 2300 Kelvin to 10,000 Kelvin in regular mode, but you can actually extend the color temperature to go from 1800 Kelvin to 20,000 Kelvin. It has a tint adjustment where you can add green or magenta in order to match any other light sources that you use on set. Check out my previous video on how this can really affect your white balance. The 360c also has HSI mode, a full RGB mode, and an effect mode. The knob on the body actually has a freewheel function. You just turn the knob really fast and it will automatically wheel by itself all the way to the end of the range. All you need to do is grab it at any point to stop the freewheel. This makes it really quick and easy to get to whatever level you need to. The release button for the modifier is an improvement as well. It's on the side, easier to access and simpler to use. The whole build feels strong and professional. Compared to the 200X, the size difference is obvious. All of it, height, width, length, is just a lot more bulkier. Even the lamp itself. Same with the weight. The 200X comes in at about 3.6 pounds, while the 360c is double that at 7.4 pounds. But remember, the 200X does have a small power supply, so when you add it to the total weight, the difference between the two lights are actually only 2 pounds. Now let's take a look at how the 360c performs against the 200X. Here's a real-life scenario of shooting against a bright window. So as usual, in this scenario, I will first expose for the window. And this is a classic issue of needing to balance the level inside the room with the outside. Now, if I want to shoot at a 2.8 aperture with a shutter of 1/48 of a second and my base ISO of 800, let's see how many stops of light we need to compensate for. If you're not super familiar with stops, it's the universal language of DPs and gaffer. Each stop is the doubling of the amount of light relative to middle gray. So in this instance, if I'm working with the gaffer, telling him or her how many stops of light I need is critical. An easy way to measure stops if you don't have a light meter is to use your lens. Starting from 2.8, which is the aperture I want to shoot at, let's close the aperture while looking at our false color and count how many stops it takes to expose the window correctly. Here's 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops, 4 stops, 5 stops, and 6 stops. This looks good and balanced. The window is perfectly exposed. The sky is nowhere near clipping. So we now know that we need 6 stops of light above middle gray to balance this room. But I want to shoot at 2.8, so let's open the aperture again to 2.8. And we can either adjust our shutter speed 6 stops faster, or a better option is to add 6 stops of ND filter. Every time we double the ND value, we add 1 stop, starting with ND2 as 1 stop, so ND4 is 2 stops, ND8 is 3 stop, ND16 is 4 stop, ND32 is 5 stops, and ND64 is 6 stops. So now our exposure is set. We have the exact same exposure at 2.8 that we had at Aputure 22, simply because we added those 6 stops of ND filter. But what do you think I'm gonna look like once I sit in that chair? This is the classic battle that many of us have to solve on various sets. Now we know that we need 6 stops of light in order to expose the subject properly. So let's see if the 360C with the provided cone actually can reach the 6 stop needed. So I'll raise the intensity while monitoring my false color to see if I can get close to a proper exposure. So now we're at 100%, and we can see that the exposure on my face is almost right. That green spot that I see here is about 45 to 50 IRE, and really I would like that to be closer to 60. So a little bit of pink on my forehead, which is the brightest spot on me at that point, would be ideal, would be what I wanted to see. But the reality is, if we look at the shot itself, we're actually very close. It looks fine. To me, I'm happy with the level of exposure. Now, I would not shoot an interview with the cone without any other diffuser in front of it, because it just creates those very harsh shadows that you see, especially with someone like me who has glasses. You just don't want to do that. It is just not pleasant. And it's very uncomfortable for the person sitting there. As far as the exposure and the intensity of the light, I think this does the trick. I have a balanced sky. Everything looks clean behind me, and I'm a little underexposed, but I feel pretty comfortable that in post-production, I could raise the levels a little bit and get me to a place where maybe I'm a little bit more exposed right. So how does this compare to the 200X? So we'll use the exact same setup, the exact same settings on the camera, and see if we can get close to exposing the shot. And this is where I got very, very confused, because as you can see on the false color, I actually have the pink spot saying my face is actually exposed brighter than the 360C. So this was very confusing to me because I did not expect that. And I literally, I'm not kidding, I had to check my settings over and over again, and I tried to understand why my false color and my waveform were better than the 360C. So this is the spec for the 360C. And we shot everything at 56K. So this one and that one. This one, these values are unmodified. So without cones, without anything. And then this one is with the cone, with the reflector. I see 1583 foot candle, and I see 4,143 foot candle. So let's go look at the 200X and see what it shows. So here is the 200X, and at 56K, unmodified at 1 meter, we have 594 foot candle, or 6,400 lux, and modified with a reflector at 1 meter, we have 4,217 foot candle, or 45,400 lux. So without a modifier, the 360C is over 2.5 times brighter than the 200X. But with the included modifier, the cone, then they're basically identical. We can see that the modifier is a 26-degree angle cone, and the 360C is a 45-degree angle cone, meaning the 200X narrows the beam of light a lot more than the 360, intensifying the beam and making it very, very bright. So did I make a mistake by buying the 360? Now what about the fact that the 360C is supposed to be twice as bright? Now remember that one stop equals doubling of the amount of light. So the 360C being 2.5 times brighter translates to only about 1.25 stops. Now that's not irrelevant. Having an extra stop of flexibility is a big deal. That's being able to shoot at a 2.8 versus an f4, for example. Or having a lens that has an aperture of 1.4 versus a 2.8. Those are significant differences, and they're both just one stop. Now let's go back to my test and see what happened when I add a softbox, which is typically what I would use during an interview. Now this is the next day, and unfortunately the sky is a little different, a little bit brighter that day. We can see that our sky is getting really close to clipping. We're in a 90% IRE. This time we have the softbox, which is the Light Dome Mini from Aputure. I did have to move the softbox a lot closer than with the cone, and also a little bit more to the side so that we wouldn't necessarily see it too much in the window. So here we are with 100% of the intensity of the light, and you can see that we are way underexposed on my face. We have a little bit of that green again, which is the 45 to 50 IRE. So let's see what the shot actually looked like. So this is the 360 with the softbox. And you can see right away that I'm a lot more underexposed than I should be. And this one I wouldn't feel comfortable with. So the only option here would be to actually bring the softbox closer or to drop our ND filter another stop. But I think at that point we would lose the sky. So this is a limitation for sure, that the 360 is still not giving me enough punch, or it's at the very edge of how much punch I need to expose this particular shot. Let's take a look at the 200 and see how it performed. And this is really where we see the difference. We can see that the level on my face are a lot lower. We're now in the 40s to 30 IRE. And on the fall off, you can see the fall off is dead center on my face, and it falls off right away. So now we're in the 10 IREs, which is not good. And if we look at the shot itself, we can see that not only are we underexposed on my key side, we're very dark on the fill side as well. So quite a bit of the difference between the two. And the reality is, that's that 1.5 stop or 1.25 stop that we saw in the specs. That's the difference. It's not something to dismiss. It really is something that will help you expose in more challenging situation. You might be on the very edge again because you don't have enough, but it'll give you that extra stops to hopefully be able to recoup this shot, bring it into post-production, and adjust it enough that it's okay. Now, I think the 360 will really prove its value once I take it out on shoot, especially when shooting B-roll and larger scenes. I should be able to flood larger scenes, larger rooms with the added brightness of the 360. So is the 360C worth upgrading from the 200X? Well, if you're shooting tight interviews, you don't need the RGB. The 200X is still an excellent tool and remains incredibly efficient. But if you want more flexibility, better performance through diffusion, and RGB capability, the 360C feels like a meaningful step forward, not just specs on paper. If you're considering the 660C versus the 360C, it's basically another doubling and a half of the brightness that light can actually output, which means an additional 1.25 stops. But it comes again at a higher price, not just financially, but as far as weight and space. If you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in learning more about cinematography, go check out my online course about camera settings. Thanks again for watching, and happy filming.